Amanda McKinney. Welcome to the Simple Pin Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Kate. I am just thrilled to be here.
Yes, and I'm always thrilled to talk with you. We have you in a previous episode where we're talking about ads. We'll link to that in the show notes. But today we're really going to be talking about this whole idea of group coaching and how that's really helped you with your Pinterest marketing. And I think what I've seen around the interwebs, and I don't know if you've seen it too, is that word coach or coaching can have this like inspired response to people of like, this is amazing, it's so great, or this, oh my gosh, this is super icky and
Mm.
it's not something I want to go down. So we hopefully with this episode want to paint that picture of it can be really good, but we are very cognizant of the fact that there's people who have had really bad negative experiences with group coaching and maybe even give some tips for choosing. But first, tell us about your business because I know you have gone through kind of a rebrand and some new iterations of your business. And I think, well, one, I think it's not a common story, but I appreciate the story of people who have come into 2023, 2024, and they're like, I don't think this former business is for me anymore, but I don't want to totally let it go, but I want to kind of bring elements in. So tell us about your first business and kind of iterating into this new business.
Yeah, this is going to be such a fun conversation that I have actually been thinking I have got to put this on my podcast because I haven't really dug into it. So we'll see what happens today and then maybe we'll
Okay.
take it to part 2 on my podcast or something.
Okay.
Because it was actually through working with your team that it was really interesting that I actually even said the phrase of like, I should probably help people that are going through pivots and changes in their business.
Hmm.
Because it was someone on your team that I was explaining something to, because I really came to the table. And of course, we're going to talk about me being in the inner circle, which I could not recommend more.
Hmm.
But it was me coming to the table with the complete understanding, which I think a lot of people don't have the complete understanding. I certainly didn't the first time I pivoted. This time around, I was very aware, okay, everything's going to massively slow down or fully stop for a hot second. I don't know
Hmm.
how long that hot second's going to be, but I know it's going to slow down. And Pinterest was one of those things that I knew was going to slow down because I had been working hard to get numbers up, but I was changing everything. So,
Hmm.
all of that to say is that I'm here to answer any questions about pivots and changes.
I
If anyone
love
has
it.
them and you included of like what we could talk
Uh,
about,
yeah.
because it's a really interesting thing. And I think part of it is kind of what you tapped into of like this idea of, I don't want everything to change, but I know that it's not
Mhm.
quite right with the business. So I'll make this the shortest version of the twisty turny road, right? Rewind the tapes to 2017. I get laid off from a job and end up starting my own business.
Mm,
I think it's such a fun part of my story of like, I was actually in an interview and they were offering me the director of marketing position. And I'm sitting at the table and I knew that I could
mm,
just see it that they didn't need a director of marketing. They needed someone to help them with the strategy, but they needed to hire the person to implement the strategy.
mm,
And so there I'm sitting, basically trying to get them to hire me as the consultant. Now, I have never thought of starting a business until this moment.
right.
And so it was a very interesting thing. I then walk out, call my husband. I said, I think I want to start a business and started Googling things, right? Like this is how it started one Google search, one podcast episode, one book at a time. And so I didn't really know what I was going to do with that information. But I just started helping people. And
Mm,
I was hired for kind of a whole bunch of different things as a consultant, a marketing consultant. So I was writing emails, writing strategy, doing all this stuff. And through saying yes to things, I somehow ended up teaching a class on email marketing, and a yoga
mm,
teacher was there. And she came up to me afterwards and said, Amanda, I never thought about it of me being a business owner until you said I
uh,
was one.
mm,
And in that moment, I thought, oh my gosh, I love yoga. Who isn't telling these yoga teachers that they're a business owner? I feel like I can change this. And so for the next, gosh, it was the next 4 years, I really honed in and only worked with yoga teachers, which was
Mm,
such a fun niche to work with. I still work with yoga teachers, by the way, but I
okay.
don't only work with yoga teachers. So to talk
Mm,
about like that, there was this weird shift. It was really in 2022 that I started to get, and it's not like a mass number of emails of this, but I started to have people tell me, Amanda, I know I'm not a yoga teacher, but I listen to your
mm,
podcast. And I don't want people to apologize to me,
right.
right? And so I was like, okay, my audience is organically shifting.
Mm,
It's not like me pivoting. It's like I'm helping more people than yoga teachers, but they feel like they have to apologize. This is weird. So that first shift was, I would say that's the second shift. That one really started to happen a little bit more organically. And I didn't do like a huge rebrand with that. I basically just started removing the word yoga teacher
mm,
and really working with entrepreneurs, small business owners, that sort of thing. But it was through publishing my book in 2023 that I realized I don't really want to teach marketing anymore,
mm,
which
okay.
was a huge shift.
Okay.
That was more of a pivot than I think mentally I was prepared for at the time. Um, and it was my book coach that said, Amanda, it sounds like you're writing the book that you feel like you should write. And I want you to write the book you want to write.
Mm,
Yeah. And it was one of those moments that I didn't know right away what the shakeout was going to be from that. But really, what it helped me understand was that I didn't want to focus on marketing, even though marketing will always be a skill set that I can bring to my clients. So, the clients that I'm working with, of course, they can talk to me about marketing and I'm helping
mm-hmm.
them with it, but it's not forefront on
Right.
on my website anymore. It's not, the new people that are finding me don't even know that I was a marketing coach before,
Mm,
which took a year. By the way,
right.
that was one of those things. That's where the pivot comes in, and where your team was like, it was such a moment of I appreciated. So everyone on your team, thank you for
Mm-hmm.
telling me this, because they recognized that I came to the table knowing I know this is going to take a while. I know that this is going to take a dip in all the numbers, revenue, website
mm,
views, all of it. And I'm not necessarily going to see the impact of this right away. So it took about a year for me to get that idea from like, I don't want to really hone in on marketing anymore. What is it that I want to do? And really what the shakeout is that the message is not perfect still, and I don't think it ever will be. But
mm,
I really work with female entrepreneurs and I help them navigate a change in their business.
mm.
And so that working with a coach when you're experiencing some sort of change, it could be a pivot, but it could
Yeah.
be I'm tired of feeling stuck and I'm ready
Yeah.
to take that action,
Mm-hmm.
which is a lot less concrete than marketing, right? So the
Yeah.
messaging is really difficult, but the feeling of being stuck. I've been working so much, and your team was part of it. It was Pinterest was part of the exploration of
Mm,
what message is working, and figuring out that phrase of women who feel tired of being stuck. Like that was a
yeah.
huge revelation that changed over time.
Yeah. Okay, I was taking notes as you were talking to touch base on, but I think it's really important to call out that like you had ideally like two pivots, right?
Hmm.
You had a pivot from corporate to entrepreneurial, which
Right.
that in itself is a huge leap for a lot of women. They sometimes have difficulty going from a very set schedule,
Hmm.
very set parameters to wide open schedule, no parameters, kind of I get to do what I want with my day. And I find that some women make that leap and they're like, this is amazing. And other people flounder. And for
Right.
you, it's like, do you feel like you made that first pivot pretty well? Did it feel like it fit like a glove, or did you flounder at all too?
Mm. Gosh, my first gut instinct, which I'm learning to like, what is that gut feeling? Is I freaking loved it. That
Mm,
freedom and flexibility was 100% what I wanted, and I didn't even know I wanted it.
mm.
I mean, I was on that trajectory of climbing the corporate ladder. That was the
Wow.
only thing I thought about. It was like, I am going to be a top executive, all of these things. I never thought about starting my own business. So it wasn't like it was this dream I had like was striving for. And so when I experienced it very quickly, I was like, I never want to work for someone again, which I
Mm,
say kind of tongue in cheek. If
right.
there are people I would absolutely work for, if the opportunity was right.
Right.
What I know now is that if I have to put in a PTO request and count those hours ever again, I'm not going to feel like I'm living my best life.
Yeah.
Like that was a pretty quick revelation of that is not the way I want to live my life. Not that it's wrong, it just didn't feel right for me
Right.
anymore. So that happened pretty quickly. But I didn't know what to do with my
Mm,
time because I was so used to kind of clocking in, sitting there until 5 p.m. most of the time afterwards.
yes.
And I was like, oh my gosh, I felt really unsure. And I
Mm,
remember a mentor telling me very early on, she said, Amanda, you're going to have to get used to the ebbs and flows of
mm,
entrepreneurship. And I was like, okay. And I just
mm,
heard it, right? I like listened to the
yeah.
words. I wish I had truly understood that sentence
Mm,
when she told me
right.
because the ebbs and flows feel so much bigger than like the busy season of corporate life versus
Right.
not. And I guess it's the stability of the paycheck that throws it off or something. But
Yeah.
that took me, I mean, I feel like I still deal with that today.
Mm, yeah. And I almost wonder too if that transition to the entrepreneurial meeting your yoga teacher kind of like falling into this
Mm,
path, right?
right.
And that you hit this next point of pivot and you go, "Oh yeah, now this fits here." And I
Yeah.
don't think there's especially well, maybe there is, maybe there's not. I guess from my vantage point sometimes it feels as though you start this entrepreneurial journey, this is where you're at. And I see one of two paths: either people pivot or they just burn out.
Mm,
And I appreciate that you've pivoted into something new and you're continuing to find your voice, find your teaching, because I think that is the beautiful part of being an entrepreneur is
mm-hmm.
that you do get to dictate your path. And I have felt at times there, well, I'm known for Pinterest. I can't go any outside of
Right.
that. For years on my podcast, I was like, I can't talk about anything but Pinterest. I can't, and then I realized that just as you said, your business is growing, pivoting, and changing, and Pinterest bumps into that and it is
mm-hmm.
a part of that. You can't extract it. So, being able to tell people's business stories that include Pinterest really gave me a lot of freedom to
Mm,
see that there's so many different business models. One, that use Pinterest, but two, that grow and change and pivot and do all those different things,
yeah.
which is really cool.
I think
So,
it's great. And I think it's, people like you that share the story. I mean, I feel like I only know the bits and pieces, right, that you've shared with me or on the podcast or whatever. But I love hearing your story of how you
mm,
started. And like one of your stories that I think I'll never forget. And it's one of the ones that I will tell clients about because I think a lot of people get in their head about things being like, you have to do things perfectly or figure things out. And your story of
mm-hmm.
meeting your first employee at the grocery store is
Yes.
like one of my favorite stories that's not mine.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
just love it so much.
Mm-hmm.
And again, bringing it back to you and your team, since like I know we're going to talk about the inner circle and I've gotten to meet even more of them, is you've been able to create a culture that is so awesome.
Mm,
And when I said like, oh, I'll never want to work for someone else again, like that's a lie. Like if you came
right.
to me and the opportunity was there, right? Like
Yes.
your kind of
Yeah.
company, because you're building that in a way
Mm,
that the women who work for you love working for you and
yeah.
I am assuming don't have to count their
Mm,
PTO hours like I did in
yes.
corporate.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. Well, and thank you for that. I really appreciate that too, because team is a super important part of it. And it is I was commenting on a thread the other day. Somebody said, "How do I get this lift in my business where I can take time away and not feel like I'm kind of
Mm,
enslaved to it all the time?" And I responded, "Team. You have to hire a team."
yeah.
And that is hard. One, because you have to have capital to do it. And number two, you have to have this willingness to train somebody and work through those bumps and work through those personality things. And that's hard for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I think, especially right now, when we feel very stretched thin in our current economy, that is tough. But
Mhm.
I always want people to know this is not a hire somebody full time, give them medical benefits, give, I mean, of course that's the dream, but maybe you're wading into the waters is you hire somebody for 5 hours.
Mhm.
You hire something here and there. And I think maybe that's the direction that we'll go is you figure out too. I think team
Mhm.
can also be a coach, a guide, a group. Like these are things
Mhm.
that can add to your life. And I want to say this as somebody who's had experience with coaching, both group coaching and group masterminds and one on one coaching, is that you got to find what works for you. You have to find not only the person, but you also have to find the group that works for you. And that one experience isn't going to dictate future experiences, but you don't know. Maybe you're a group person, maybe you're a one on one person. And I think for us, that was actually the whole idea of how we created the Simple Pin Inner Circle was okay, if we're looking at all these different learning styles of people and we want to take a small group of people through a curriculum to get an end result, could that be better than just a one off consult? Or could that be better than a membership? What could result in that? So for us, it was actually an experiment to see will it actually work? So let's kind of back up a little bit to what you said about Pinterest kind of being you had this moment, this realization for your new business, these pieces. So kind of walk us through that. And I would say, marketing. How did Pinterest even factor into this? Because frankly, what we hear is it's usually last on the list for people. I mean,
Mm,
people are kind of salivating to start TikTok or to grow
sure.
on Instagram. Usually Pinterest is way down the list.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. So I'll answer that first part first, or the second part first about why Pinterest, because I think it's so important. And I recognize that I have the marketing background, but I hope that this comes across in a way that I'm speaking, yes, from a marketing background, but also an entrepreneur who
Mm,
started her business with $100 from my personal bank account to file for an LLC,
mm,
never getting capital, building it one client at a time. And so my time and my financial resources were strapped. And I really considered everything of like what is the most important. And
mm,
Pinterest has always been part of it. Because of my marketing background and my corporate marketing background, I learned so much that if your business is not searchable, like you are not
mm,
setting yourself up for the future, period. And so for me, I've never placed all my eggs in social media. Like it is a nice to have. It's always been, now I think Instagram is fun. So I could easily fall into the trap of like being on Instagram a lot if I allow myself to do it. Funny enough, I decided to take July off of, we're recording this in August,
yeah.
and I decided to take July off of Instagram. I'm still not on. Like I
Oh,
just stayed
that's
off. So I don't
such a
really know,
relief.
like, I don't know what the future holds for that,
Yeah.
but I do find Instagram fun. But Pinterest has always been important to me, just like SEO has always been important to me. And so, all my clients, if they're listening to this, they're like, yeah, she doesn't stop talking about that. Because
Mhm.
I would say, I don't care if you're on social media, but content, if you choose to go down the content marketing way, and go that route, then you need to know what SEO is. And depending on the industry, but most of the time, Pinterest is also going to be right next to it.
Right.
So for me, it's always been top of mind, which
Mm.
I think I connected with you way back in like 2018. I mean, it was like
Yeah.
early, early on. You've been a part of my journey for so long, and I'm so
Mhm.
thankful that you have
Mhm.
been. And so it's been interesting. So Pinterest has always been part of it. Now the other hard part when you're wearing a ton of hats, at least for me, is like, and I really came to this realization, and it's kind of hard for people like myself that think that I can do all the things.
Mm.
You know, you were the one that introduced me to the Colby,
Yes,
assessment.
that's right. The most magical test. By
Yes.
for those listening, it's KOLBE, and it's a
Yes.
great test that measures like really how you work, how you think, different than the Enneagram, different than the Strengths Finder. Your Colby actually usually does not change.
It's
So,
incredible. You
yeah.
nailed it. I mean, I think it was on a podcast interview that you were like, "Have you ever taken the Colby? I think you've got high follow through."
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
The answer is absolutely yes. So, anyways, the hard part for me is to basically say, I can't be the expert
Mm.
in Pinterest. That is not where my zone of genius is. And that's really what I recognized very recently. That is different from when I first started my business. When I was first starting, I was like, okay, I have the time and the resources to invest in figuring this out. And I'm a huge believer in do the thing before you outsource it, if at all possible,
Mm.
because then you can find the right person to outsource.
Yes.
Kind of like you were talking about finding the right coach, finding the right group. If you have no idea what to do with Pinterest, I don't mean this in a bad way because I know that there's great people out there like yourself that would not do this, but there's a lot of people who will take advantage of that.
Yeah.
And I never want myself or anyone I work with to get taken advantage of. And so I encourage all of my clients do the thing first,
Mhm.
figure out enough, and then if you want to outsource it, go for it. And so basically, we're at the point of like you saying, like, you have to have a team. Like,
Hmm.
what I realized, and I learned so much through the inner circle, like, I did it all. I took all
Mhm.
of the steps and I learned so much. And it was so important for me to do it if- through this pivot because everything changed again. Right.
Right.
But I definitely realized it's time.
Yeah.
It's time to hand some things over because
Mhm.
simply because I don't I don't want to do it halfway. And that's kind of where my time comes in. But the time I spent in the inner circle really set me up for success.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
that realization of, well, and I guess why I'm saying that is because sometimes that's what we need. That's what I needed. In that
Right.
moment, like I was like, I can take it on, I can do all the things. And the reality is, I would rather find someone, your team, to help me with Pinterest on an ongoing basis to hit my goals
Mm.
rather than me spending the time to try and figure it out on my own, which is what the inner circle really did. But I did do the work on like all of the inner circle stuff and it was really
Mhm.
cool to see and I was like so glad. I think part of me was like, "Oh, this is going to be so overwhelming to change things with the pivot." And but when I got in, I was like, "Oh, I'm so proud of past Amanda for doing all the work that I did since
Yes.
2017.
Yes.
This is great."
Totally. And also, will you tell listeners too, you reached out to me about this idea of a quiz and growing your
Yes.
email list with a quiz. And it was, I don't remember. I think I was like in the middle of like health storm
I
things.
was
So I
like,
was like,
you were super sick. I felt
yeah,
really bad. I caught
no,
you
it's
at like
fine.
the worst time ever.
It was rough. May was a rough month. But what was great is that that led to you meeting with my team and that
Yes.
led to the inner circle and that led to more things. But tell us a little bit about like that first aha moment. Like
Mhm.
how can I use a quiz, use Pinterest to grow my audience?
Yeah. This is a great question. And I think it goes back and I'm sitting here thinking, I don't know if I answered the first question you asked me earlier. So if I didn't, please bring it back up.
Okay.
Um but you said, why was Pinterest top of mind? And I am always thinking about searchability and my email list. Again, social media is a nice to have. It is extra. It is not top priority for me. Period. End of
Mm,
story. I think a lot of people do not think that way, and that is totally fine. But I refuse to build my
mm,
business on borrowed land. And
yes.
so the two things that I think about are what can I put online that can be searched and how can I build my email list? Those are the two things. And when people, all of my clients ask, like, how have you stayed in business this long? How have you made those pivots happen? And it's amazing how the pivots have been okay. I mean, even the massive pivot from helping yoga teachers with marketing to helping female entrepreneurs navigate a change in their business.
Mm.
I still have an email list that has come with me. Have I lost people?
Yeah.
Sure. Of course. The people who are looking for marketing help need the marketing help. But the great thing is, I've connected with people over time, and so I could refer them
Mhm.
out. Um,
Mhm.
but the reason that I'm honing in on that is because that it helped my business not completely go down in flames in between, because I did have an email list, and I did get to navigate that in a way. And I've always thought of how can I grow my email list? And so quizzes have been really cool. And so the system that I have used, and again, it's another connection that I got back in 2020. And I had one of the co-founders of Try Interact on my podcast, and he, just like you, kind of jumped in, was so willing to share. He and the other co-founder story of how they started this
Mhm.
business is just unbelievable. And he was so willing to just share the story on the podcast that we stayed connected. I stayed a partner of theirs all this time. And then I was like, you know what? I haven't had a quiz in a while.
Mhm.
Maybe I should think about, growing my email list with a quiz again. So I reached back out. Come to find out, they were just working with AI, and they were like, will you help us test something? I did, and looked at it, and I was like, this is so cool. So if you haven't used their AI tool,
Yeah.
go do that
Okay.
immediately because it's so cool. It's a great way to test your messaging
Mm.
because basically you put your URL into their system and it will create a quiz for you in 2 minutes.
What? Because that's my biggest hurdle to creating
It's
quizzes
2
is
minutes,
I'm
Kate. It's 2
okay.
freaking minutes.
Thank you. Okay.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And of course you can change things and make
Right.
it, fit yourself, but fit your brand. But it's amazing. But for me, it very quickly, the first time I put my URL in there, I was like, oh shoot, my messaging is off. Because
Mm.
it spits out a quiz based on your website.
That's
And
amazing.
I told them, I
Okay.
was like, this is an amazing tool for marketing.
Yeah.
This is testing messaging at its best. So, anyways, all of that to say, I was thinking about experimenting with a quiz and I created a quiz and it was not getting a ton of traction. Then I made a change to the quiz and I saw pretty significant change in
Mm.
traffic quickly.
Okay.
And I was like, huh, this is really interesting. So I started thinking about like, I was working with them on this case study and then all of a sudden I was like, you know what? I want to use Pinterest to grow my email list with this quiz, but
Mhm.
I don't know the answer. And then that was the day I was like, I know someone who does. And so I
Mhm.
reached out to you, you connected me with the team. And so that's how that all started. I think one thing is, always ask. I
Yeah.
think that's the important thing. A lot of people forget, like, just reach out and ask. Because, of course, you could
Yeah.
have said, no,
Yeah.
I don't want to help you with this. And that would have been fine. But the chances of that were pretty low because I was like, we've worked together
Yeah.
before. And so maybe
Yeah.
we can do something, which then led to me joining the inner circle to try and
Mm.
figure out not just how to figure out the quiz, how to use the quiz on Pinterest, because again, I wanted it to run in the background. I don't
Mhm.
need something to take up more of my time. I wanted
Mhm.
it to kind of run in the background, which Pinterest isn't a run in the background, but it kind of is once you get it set up.
Right. The long shelf life.
Right. And so I was like, okay, I know it's not, I'm doing nothing, like I'm not doing nothing. It's not completely passive, but it's not me having to interact with people on Instagram 24
Right.
7.
And I want to call this out too, because I think one of the things that we hear when somebody comes up with an idea like yours, you said, okay, I want to use Pinterest to drive traffic to this quiz to get more people on my email
Mm-hmm.
list. And over again, we find people going, okay, how many pins a day do I use? Okay, then what kind of keywords do I use?
Mm,
And then they really don't even consider the image. I mean, they kind of consider the image,
mm-hmm.
but it's almost like they put the cart before the horse and they say, how can I just blast it out there instead of backing up and saying, okay, how do we create an amazing image
Mm-hmm.
that gets people to actually want to click? Because that is the first hurdle of Pinterest, right? Is that
Right.
how do you even get them to engage because they're scrolling by so fast or who knows what they've searched? And then it's into, okay, what are they putting into the search bar to
Mm-hmm.
search to get to look at the image? And then the landing page, like when they get to your site, does it make sense? And I think you did that work with the quiz, putting it
Mm,
through and the messaging was off, making minor tweaks, and then now you get more exposure. And I find that there's just that narrow place where people just go, how many pins a day? And it's like, that
interesting.
is not the answer. The answer is you back up, you look at what you did and say,
Mm,
okay, this is not really converting on its own.
right.
How do I make a tweak to get better? Okay, you did it and you're like, okay, now it's working. Now, how do we get that lift? And
Hmm.
so for you, tell us a little bit about like exploring the keywords, messing around with the images, like as you're working through that in the inner circle,
Yeah.
what kind of aha moments did you have about that?
Oh my gosh, so many. So many. So the first thing, which was a huge, I mean, I would have spent hours, days, weeks, I don't know how long, but a lot of my time overthinking and overdoing the cleanup of my
Mm,
account, because that's where I was really like, almost like you just did with the quiz of like, you're like, that's my hang up because I know it's going to take a long time.
yeah.
I was thinking, oh my gosh, this account cleanup is going, I made it a big freaking deal when it really wasn't. And I needed someone to dock me off the ledge.
Yes.
And that was the
Yes.
inner circle. Like,
Yep.
thank you, everyone in there. Because the account cleanup, I had become, I was like thinking it was going to be so big. It really wasn't. There's like a 1 page document and a video that you watch for like 10 minutes,
Hmm.
which is so beautiful. And it's like, all you have to do is watch this video and then do this thing. And all the videos were super short, doable. Like everything in the inner circle was like, e- I don't know how many iterations you had before. I know I was in the second cohort, but
Yeah.
in terms of like how many things you were like, maybe we could do this, maybe we could do that,
Hmm.
you landed on a great idea of
Yeah.
like, this is very helpful. Short videos, a Slack community where you can ask questions, and dripped out content,
Mm.
because that was real helpful, of 1 week at a time.
Yeah.
And so that cleanup was the first thing, and not overthinking what goes in the profile,
Mm.
what, that sort of thing. And it was super helpful with the keywords as well. The interesting part about what you were just saying is like that some people go to how many pens per day. Now, I did ask that question at
Mm-hmm.
some point, but it
Yep.
certainly wasn't the first one. So that's
Mm-hmm.
really interesting to me, that maybe I was just naive and thinking I'm doing fine. I don't know
Well,
what I
and
was
I think
thinking.
it's like me saying about Instagram, how many times do I post or what
Right.
type of day, right?
Yeah,
So
right.
I think it
Yeah.
feels like you can easily grab at it and do something instead of backing up and doing the hard work of,
Mhm.
okay, what is really going to get people to convert? And we definitely, the first cohort that we went through, we learned that we added too much in the beginning when
Mm.
it came to cleanup and auditing and pieces like that. So we actually then stretched it out over the
Ah,
6 to 7 weeks because
okay.
we didn't want people to feel overwhelmed. We want people to feel like, okay, I'll watch this video, I can do this. And then Sarah and Emily, who are in there to lead that group,
Wonderful.
asking questions, all
Yeah.
those kinds of things. And we modeled it after our accelerator package, which is what we take clients through all the time.
Mhm.
And so we said, we know that people, and especially in this economy, don't always have the budget to be able to
Right.
hire it out. But like you said, there's a little bit of due diligence in doing it yourself first
Mhm.
so that you understand the why, you understand kind of this is the tone or the
Mhm.
strategy that I want for my Pinterest account.
Yeah.
And then this goes through that methodical steps that we've always done. And so we said, can we do this with a group? Can we
Mhm.
lead them through in order for them to bump out the other side and go, oh yeah, I'm good, like I
Mhm.
have it all set up, I have a strategy, I know my why,
Mhm.
and now I can iterate on what I need to iterate on.
Oh, it's fantastic. Whatever changes you all made from the first to
Hmm.
the second cohort worked great,
Hmm.
because I felt like it was dripped out in a great way. Now, I would say, and I think I said this to whomever I had the follow-up call with, was like, I can imagine that someone just starting, like
Yeah.
brand new, might be overwhelmed. I'm not saying that it was like
Hmm.
super simple. I've been using Pinterest for 7 years at this point. Um, I knew I needed to be using it better and more
Mm,
efficiently, but I had been in it, you know? So, like,
yeah.
the idea of like, how do you create a pin? I didn't have to be told how to create a pin. So, that's not one thing I had to learn. It's something that someone would have to learn. And so that would feel like a bigger lift to
Mm,
learn everything. I can imagine that those moments would feel overwhelming. But here's the thing, in my opinion, and maybe other people don't feel the same, and that's fine. But I feel like if whatever you go into, whether it's coaching, and this is going back to like the experience that some or the thoughts some people have about coaching in any way, when we go into a coaching experience, whether it's one on one, group, mastermind, whatever it is, I truly believe to a certain extent, there are some anomalies out there, you get what you put in. And so
yeah.
when I signed up for the inner circle, which I was very thankful for the group element to really understand at a better financial point of like, can I do this? It was really
Mhm.
accessible. And when I signed up for it, I was like, can I dedicate? And I don't know if this is right or not, but I was like, can I dedicate 3 to 5 hours a week or 2 hours a week? Or
Right.
can I dedicate time to going through, not just going through, but actually taking the actions? Because if the answer is no, I do not need to waste anyone's time.
Mhm.
And so
Yep.
doing that, and then the other part of it was I asked every question possible in the Slack channel.
Yep. Yep,
I
that's
was
what it's
not
there for.
scared to ask all the
Yeah.
questions. And there was one thing, and I have to give a shout out. I can't remember. I think it was Tabby who actually recorded the video for us. I said, is there any way that someone could record a video actually doing the pinning in Tailwind? Because to
Oh, yep.
see it
Miss
would
Tabby.
really be helpful for me.
Yep.
And it ended up that a lot of other people in the group wanted that, and but no one had
Mhm.
mentioned it. And that's when it made me realize I think there are some people, going back to kind of the Colby thing of like personality test. Some people are more apt to ask those questions,
Mhm.
and I say, gosh, if you're going into a group, ask the question, because chances are someone else has got the same question.
Mhm.
And
100%.
and the
And
worst case scenario was someone said no. Like I won't.
right. Right. And chances are they usually don't do that. And I think too, you made such a great point about the time commitment.
Mhm.
And I think that is a huge component of learning in our current environment. So if I was going to lean into learning, going deeper on SEO or trying to figure out any of that,
Mhm.
if I joined a group, I want to get as much out of it as
Yes.
possible. And I want to ask questions. I want to make sure that my time during this short cohort is really maximized, that I can truly come out the other side and say,
Mhm.
I've got a plan. Doesn't mean I'm never going to need a refresher, never going to learn again. Probably not, because things change,
Right.
right? But I think that commitment of hours is so important. And we are super transparent about that
Mhm.
too in our sales page to say, this is a commitment. Like, this is not a, you're 30 minutes a week
Right.
to it, like, if you believe that Pinterest is a really important part of your marketing,
Mhm.
this is an investment that you can make in order to get the lift that you need for your business. And so be very cognizant of your time and
Mhm.
aware of questions. If you're a fact finder, if you're a question asker, like, ask away. Like,
Yeah.
that's why we have that group there. And to your point, everybody else was probably thinking the same thing,
Oh, yeah. People
but
were
nobody had
thrilled.
said, like, I want to see actually how it's done, because there is so much mystery, right?
Mhm.
There's a lot of mystery around strategies, because we've seen in Facebook groups, we've seen in blog
Mhm.
posts, people say, this is my strategy and this is how I went from my zero to hero story on
Right.
Pinterest. And we all think up what that is, but nobody knows. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's just somebody showing, well, this is how I do it. And they're like, oh, it's not as
Yeah.
hard as I thought.
That was exactly it. Because I was overcomplicating it yet again of like, "Oh, I'm gonna have to do all this other stuff," and no.
Yeah.
Like, take it down a notch, Amanda. It was just I needed to see someone do it. I'm
Mm,
a very visual learner, and I know that about myself, and so hearing it was one thing, and even watching a video and having someone talk through it was one thing. I needed to see it happen.
yes.
And that was so helpful. And I was just so thankful, but I think it's a true testament of going through the inner circle of you get what you ask for, you get what you are going in there with. So having a goal, knowing the time, I think it's important. I think it's so important to do that no matter what kind of program you're going into. And I love that you guys had it like on the sales page of how much time it would take. And it was very helpful because then I could determine, can I do this right now? Yes, I
Mm,
can. Okay, and it was
yeah.
wonderful. So, and another thing that you asked about was like tweaking things.
Mm.
This was so helpful. It was very interesting because what I've known about Pinterest, me, not the expert here, is that, generally speaking on Pinterest, it's not super brand focused. Like on
Mhm.
Instagram, I've run ads and people need to see my face. So
Yeah.
I've done that type of branding. Not everyone has to do that, but ads with my face performed better. When I went over to Pinterest, I just didn't think that that would be the case
Yeah.
because I've heard, oh, stock
Yeah.
images. Like I just kind of went with that. Well, as part of the cleanup, when you're at least what we were taught at this time that I was being
Mhm.
taught, the board cover was
Mm.
just supposed to be a picture with no text.
Right.
And so for one of the images, I think it was my podcast board, I was like, oh, I'll just do a picture of me with the podcast mic, right?
Mhm.
Kate, that pin is by far killing it
Wow.
compared to
That's
anything else.
super cool.
And I was like, and so afterwards, because that was early on. That was like week one, I'm doing the cleanup, right? 6 weeks in,
Mhm.
I've got this data. And
Yeah.
I'm looking at it thinking, oh my gosh. And so now each week there's pins that just have my face
Mm.
that I'm testing. And I'm sure enough going to do that with the
Yeah.
quiz, right? And
Yep.
see. And so it's looking at that, like I just would have never known that had I not just happened to test it. And
Yes.
then you look at the data and then do more of that. So to give all your team the kudos, it's like
Mm.
they're really good at helping you pick up on those things that you might miss. I would have missed that. I
Yeah.
think I would have missed that on my own simply because I'm just trying to move through things.
Mhm.
But that pin is performing the best.
So cool. And I what I love about that is you just challenged a norm. Like you challenged the norm of like, okay, we've heard 97% of searches are unbranded, but that really aligns to searches and searching Amanda
Mm,
McKinney instead of your face on an image. And we've also heard before, like, not so much today, but like no faces and try to be a little less personal and
right.
all these things. And you kind of challenged those and did that. And now you're like, okay, well, let's see how this works. Let's try it and let's see how we can extend our reach on it. And that's not something that you could say, like, this is going to replicate it every single time for every
Right.
brand, but it's a super cool thing to test if someone's stuck. And I think that's the experience
Mm,
that our team has all these years is like, okay, when someone's stuck, what do we test? What do we try? Like
mm,
every single time, if we look at the numbers, what's the thing we have to bump? What's the thing we have to move? And I just love that willingness of being able to challenge what high level 10,000 foot level can say,
hmm.
because it's going to be different for every brand. And
Yeah.
you can't just say, okay, this is what's going to work for Amanda McKinney, this is going to what's going to work for Simple Pin Media.
Hmm.
It really has to be unique to you, and that's the hard part of marketing, right?
It
That
is.
you can't take, and it's really frustrating.
It's
And I
super
would love for it
frustrating.
to be easy, right? Like I would love for it to be this thing of like, I saw, Amy Porterfield do
Right.
this, and now I'm going to do this over here. And it just does not, it doesn't work like that.
It doesn't. And it's super frustrating. And I think one of the things that I've seen when I'm working with clients is, and that I've noticed through my 7 years of being an entrepreneur, is that I'm willing to just toss something out there to see
Mm,
what happens. And I think a lot of people are scared of doing that. And I totally understand because the chances are it's going to fail. Most of the things I toss out there don't work, right? There's all
right.
these pins that I put out there that are not quote unquote working. Who knows? Maybe they'll pick up in 6 months.
Yeah.
It's out there.
Hmm.
But if you're so scared to just try, it's like One of my friends just messaged me the other day and she said, Amanda, you inspired me to shoot my shot. And I sent that email and I
Mhm.
said, what's it going to be? And I'm reminded back to your story of when you were on the Jasmine Star podcast. And I
Oh,
said,
yeah.
how in the heck did you get on there? And you said, I was sitting in a hotel room and I
Yep.
sent an email.
Mhm.
And I think that that message has to be heard so many times over and over
Yeah.
again, especially on the hard days. Cause it's like, I know how hard it is to send that email, to
Mhm.
post that thing that you're really scared to do. But I think that that's the thing. And we're seeing it even like me putting something on Pinterest, right? It's just
Yeah.
testing and
Yeah.
seeing what works, knowing that two things are going to work and 20 things are not.
Yes. Which is so frustrating.
It's so frustrating. I wish that that was not the case, but I
Uh,
think the more that we can have a
mm,
realistic expectation, the better the the experience will be
yes.
overall versus like feeling like it's such a slugfest, being like
Yeah.
thinking of it more like a game.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good way to think about it. So, okay, let me recap and we'll kind of wrap it
Good
up.
luck with that.
You've had an entrepreneurial shift, you've had a pivot in your business, you have written a book, and you are now, really trying to dial in this quiz. Where do you see your business in the back half of 2024?
You're catching me on a really interesting day because I feel like
Mm.
last week I was like having one of those weeks that was like, nothing is working. I think my business is going to be burned down by the end of the year. Not
Mhm.
really, but having one of those like nothing seems to be working time frames.
Right.
And I was just, Michael and I were in the backyard, and I was like, my morning has just been one of those mornings where things are falling into place.
Mm.
And I was, I've been asked to speak several times.
Mm.
Just this morning, I was asked for two more times for me
Wow.
to be a paid speaking gig, which is something that
Yeah.
I've wanted to do. And I didn't really know if it was possible. But again, you got to shoot your shot.
Yeah.
You have to put your name in the ring for some of these things. And so I feel like there's more of a shift. And I felt it when I started writing the book of me
Mm.
speaking more, which I would
Mm.
love to do because I
Yeah.
love being in person. I love virtual. I love encouraging people to shoot their shot, to do the thing, and that's a gift that I have and I need to really hone in on that. The podcast has been awesome. I'm not turning it off or anything.
Yeah.
But I do think that that idea of like thought leadership is really
Mm.
more of the forefront of what I'm doing. And I hope to continue to work with clients for sure. That's
Mm.
not something I want to stop doing. But I think that that is really what it's coming around to. And a lot of people have asked me to talk about goal setting and
Mm.
achieving that goal and really making the shifts in their business. And so I think that's where it's really going. But who
Yeah.
knows?
Yes. It's true. It's like this, I think of it like Candyland, right? Like you never know when you're gonna like get up
Yeah.
the ladder and you're gonna like slide down the slide, or shoots and ladders, that's what it is.
Yes, yes, yes,
Um,
yes.
yeah, so I mean you just never know. But I'm so excited for you. I'm excited
Mm.
for you continuing to shoot the shot and to just take follow the path where it's going to take you. And I'm also really excited for you with the quiz and how Pinterest is going to multiply over this next year and what it's going to bring in. And I just appreciate your championing of Simple Pin Media
Oh my
and the inner
gosh.
circle. Like, for us it was there's always a risk when starting a new program, right?
Sure.
But the feedback that we've gotten has been great, and we're starting our third cohort
Yay.
in the end of August, beginning of September, and those go for 6 weeks. And
Oh
we
my
want to keep them
gosh.
6 weeks because we know people get fatigued. We know
Mhm.
people hit their point, and I don't want to stretch out anything longer. I don't want you to buy a course and never do it. This is such an
No.
intentional program
Yeah.
to say, get in this intensive, do it, and then move on to the next thing you're focused on, or coast, or whatever you need to do. And so for us, I think we foresee in 25, we'll probably run the cohort again 3 times.
Mhm.
And, we try to keep it to 15 people. We might go to 20, just depending
Mhm.
on interest. But for us, it's really how do you tap into that learning model of people that are fact finders, that are high follow through. The quick start might get super annoyed with the program, right?
Yeah.
They might just be like, where's week
Give
7
it all to
on week
me.
1? Yes, exactly.
Well, I cannot tell people enough. Like, first and foremost, if you want my firsthand experience, I feel like you've gotten a lot of it in this episode.
Yeah.
But please don't ever hesitate to reach out. I am happy to answer any questions if someone has really wants to talk to me about it, because
Yeah.
it was such an amazing program. If anyone is thinking about Pinterest, if you've made it this far in the podcast episode, you're thinking about Pinterest and you're really thinking about maybe there's a pivot that you're having in your business. Oh my gosh, it's a perfect time. And I really think I'm going to specifically talk about this next cohort because of the timing. Although, if
Yeah.
someone's listening to this anytime, jump in regardless. But oh my gosh, I think getting in right now so that you can cross it off your list before the end of the year is an
Mm,
unbelievable experience. Like, you'll get in 6 weeks later, you've got everything set up. And I did walk away with a hardcore strategy that I feel awesome with.
mm,
It is doable for me right now. But I was also very aware of, like, this is something I need to hand over to someone else, but I can do it right now. I can,
yeah.
this is a phased approach. I can do this right now, but the goal is to hand it off to your team, because I know that they could do it better. But I
Mm,
did 100% walk away with a strategy, and they were so good about helping me come up with a strategy that I could actually keep going with, that I did not
yes.
have to hire out. So I just want to make
Mhm.
that very clear. While it was clear to me that my next step is to give this away because I don't need to
Yes.
do everything.
Right.
Um, I walked away with a strategy that I can implement and have been, by the way,
Mhm.
ever since
Great
the
job.
program has ended.
Yeah.
So it is doable to create something. You don't have to replicate like the ideal situation, because I couldn't handle and take on the ideal situation for Pinterest. I
Mm,
had to scale it back, and
yeah.
it's working. So yeah,
Yeah.
I can't recommend it enough.
I love that. Thank you for being a champion for us. And for those who are listening to the podcast, just so you know, this is the first time we have done video. So you can head over to our YouTube channel and you can see Amanda and I in our
Yay!
faces in person, which has been so fun. We're going to continue to do that. So scroll down in your podcast app. You can see the link to YouTube. Make sure you are subscribed over there as well. And then, Amanda, where can they go to connect with you?
Wonderful. Well, they can take my quiz. How about
Look
that
at
for a
that.
segue?
Yes. And actually, let me say that before you say where to go. One of the greatest things that you can do, especially if you're not in the same industry as Amanda, is go take her quiz.
Mm,
Be a like spectator. I mean, if you are in her niche and you need
right.
her coaching services, please take it. But if you are wanting to see it from the sidelines and explore it, like do those things. And I think those are really great. And then you can send Amanda an email and say, I signed up, I'll
Yeah.
follow along, blah, 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 whatever. But sometimes do those so that you can be inspired to think differently about things that you probably never would have used before.
I
Okay,
love
segue.
that. And
Back to
it's a
you.
super fun quiz. You can be done in 2 minutes. Like, it's super easy.
Perfect.
And right now, which by the way could change if you're listening to this 6 months from now or a
Yeah.
year from now, the quiz could change, but the URL will be the same because it's amandamckinney.com/quiz. That's all you got to do.
Okay.
You'll go to the quiz.
Perfect.
But right now, it's a really fun quiz that I don't anticipate changing again for a little bit. But it's
Okay.
all about uncovering your Get Unstuck anthem by a powerhouse female singer. And so you
Okay.
get to figure out if you're an Alicia Keys, Carrie Underwood, Keela from The Greatest Showman, or Taylor Swift.
Okay. I was wondering if Taylor Swift was going to be a part of
Of
that. I
course,
was like,
she's in
of course she
there.
has to have one. That is so creative.
It's so fun. And it took 3 iterations of the quiz. So talk about tweaking. We could have a whole
Yeah.
other thing. And I really do think that that will be the case study that, like, Simple Pin, Amanda McKinney, and Try
Yeah.
Interact are doing together, is really that iteration, because it took two quote unquote wrong quizzes to get to the one that's working.
Right. And that's how it is. And it's not even wrong. It's just like a little tweak,
Right.
right? Here, it's like over here. No, over here.
Yeah.
No, over there. It's like
Yeah.
sailing, right? You're just like
Exactly. So I've
going in
never
different
thought of
directions.
it as like failing. I just recognize, oh, okay, this isn't quite working. We're not landing right. And so I swiveled a little bit over here and a little bit over here. And now when I tell people about the quiz, they're like, "Oh, that's so fun." And that's when you know you got something.
Yeah, I love it. Well, Amanda, thank you so much for joining us today and for your creativity, your feedback about the inner circle, and just your experience share. So I just really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Kate.